It was supposed to be just another Saturday, the kind that drifts by without drama, without spectacle, just errands, groceries, and maybe a quiet lunch with the family. Julian Hayes strolled the cereal aisle of community grocers with a list in his hand and a casual jacket slung over his shoulders. The lights above buzzed softly, reflecting off boxes of cornflakes and granola, each decision as mundane as the next. But the serenity of that suburban store would soon fracture, torn apart by a voice as sharp as a bullet. Hands where I can see them now. Don't make me say it again. The words didn't echo. They cut. Shoppers froze. Julian's body tensed. His mind raced, not with fear, but with calculation. He turned slowly, his hands rising like sails in surrender, locking eyes with the source, a young white officer, face flushed with adrenaline and power, nameplate reading Becker. The officer's gun was already drawn, trained on Julian's chest like it was his job. But it wasn't. Not like this. Julian's voice was steady, the product of 20 years in the field. "Officer, there's a misunderstanding here." It wasn't just his tone that defied the panic creeping through the aisle. It was the way he stood, still, grounded, composed. But Officer Becker wasn't looking for calm. He wasn't looking for understanding. He was looking for something to confirm the suspicion already festering in his mind. Something that looked like Julian Hayes. "Misunderstanding? You think I'm an idiot?" Becker barked, the barrel unshaken. "You fit the description." "What description is that?" Julian replied. Becker didn't blink. "The one in my head. It wasn't about a report. It wasn't about a theft. It was about perception, poisoned by prejudice, wrapped in a uniform." Julian was no stranger to it, but this was new, public, armed, dangerous. The man standing under that fluorescent glow wasn't just a shopper. He was a federal agent, one of the FBI's finest, a man who had faced down cartel lieutenants and domestic terrorists alike. But none of them had dared do what this boy in a badge just did. Julian didn't flinch. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He breathed, slowly, intentionally, because he knew what could happen if he didn't. And while Becker's finger danced near the trigger, Julian's mind danced through options. Compliance wasn't enough. Protest would be twisted. His badge could be mistaken for a weapon. But there was one thing he had. One person. He said it calmly, like he was ordering a sandwich. "I want to speak to your superior, the chief." Becker laughed. "You think calling the chief is going to scare me?" Julian met his eyes. No fear, just finality. "That's exactly right. I'm calling Chief Frank Donovan." The atmosphere shifted. Subtle, but seismic. The gun was still raised. But something behind Becker's eyes flickered. Doubt, recognition, dread. Julian's hands didn't waver. His voice didn't tremble. With the precision honed by years of field work, he reached for his phone. The shoppers watched, caught between disbelief and awe. The man being profiled, harassed, threatened, wasn't just a target. He was someone who knew power, who was power. And with Becker's gun still locked on his chest, Julian hit call. Because in a world where silence can get you killed, Julian Hayes was about to show everyone exactly what power looks like when it doesn't flinch. The grocery store, once humming with casual foot traffic, now felt like a stage holding its breath. Fluorescent lights bore down on two figures locked in a dangerous standoff. One held a gun, the other held his calm. Becker's posture screamed command, but his eyes betrayed a storm of insecurity. Julian, unarmed yet far more powerful, remained rooted in place, the invisible weight of decades in law enforcement anchoring him to the ground. "I said, show me your ID!" Becker barked, his voice cracking under the weight of his own panic. Julian's tone remained even, measured. "On what grounds?" "Suspicious behavior," Becker spat. "Suspicious behavior," Julian repeated softly, more to himself than to the officer. "Like deciding on cereal?" Becker stepped forward, his stance wide, gun still aimed with authority he hadn't earned. "Don't play smart. You were lingering." "I live here," Julian said firmly. "I shop here." "You don't look like you belong here," Becker snapped. That line, delivered without irony or shame, landed like a slap. Julian's eyes didn't waver, but his heart clenched, not because he was surprised, but because it was said aloud, in public, without hesitation. That was the point. This wasn't about law. It wasn't about procedure. It was about perception, about control, about someone who had never met resistance wielding power like a club. Julian saw it all in Becker's trembling hand. The tight grip on his weapon wasn't about enforcement. It was about fear. And fear, Julian knew, made people dangerous. But Julian wasn't just another man in the aisle. He was Agent Hayes. 20 years in the FBI. He'd infiltrated gangs, interrogated bomb makers, negotiated with armed cult leaders. He had been in rooms where words were deadlier than bullets. And yet, standing here, being treated like a threat for simply existing, cut deeper than any knife. Becker wasn't just ignorant. He was blinded by a story he'd written in his head. One where Julian was the villain, a man to be subdued. Julian's internal training kicked in. His eyes swept the scene. Shoppers frozen near the bread aisle. A mother clutching her child. A teenager recording with trembling hands. Tension suspended in space. He kept his voice low. "You're making a mistake, officer." Becker's finger twitched near the trigger. "Are you refusing a lawful order?" "There is no lawful order," Julian said. "There's no report, no crime. You just don't like the way I look." That was it. The truth, naked and raw. Becker's eyes narrowed. "I'm warning you. Don't escalate." "You already did," Julian replied. He took a breath, slow and purposeful, and added, "I'm calling your superior." "No, you're not," Becker said. Julian's hand moved, deliberate, slow, visible, and retrieved his phone from his jacket. Becker's gun trembled. "I suggest you stand down," Julian said, locking eyes. "You don't want to do this." And then he called. "Frank," Julian's voice now razor sharp, "I'm at Community Grocers. One of your officers has a gun pointed at me." Becker's eyes widened. "His name is Officer Kyle Becker." In that moment, everything shifted. The room didn't move, but power did. It left Becker's badge and flowed into Julian's voice. Every word a scalpel, every pause a reckoning. Across the speaker, Frank Donovan's voice came clear and cold. "He's doing what?" Julian spoke slowly. "He thinks being a black man in Crestwood is probable cause." A pause, 5 seconds of silence. Then, "Don't move! I'm coming!" Julian lowered the phone. Becker's arm sagged slightly, the barrel dipping. "I told you," Julian said, stepping into command without raising his voice. "You picked the wrong man." The sound of screeching tires cut through the stunned silence like thunder cracking a stormy sky. Outside the store, an unmarked black sedan swerved to a halt, and seconds later, the sliding doors of Community Grocers hissed open. Chief Frank Donovan stepped inside, not in uniform, but exuding a presence that demanded attention. Broad-shouldered, eyes scanning like radar, he moved with the authority of someone who had spent his life commanding respect, not demanding it. As he walked into the cereal aisle, the crowd instinctively parted, recognizing that something monumental was unfolding. Donovan's eyes locked on Julian first, tense, upright, alive. Relief flooded his face, but it quickly curdled into fury the moment he turned and saw Officer Kyle Becker, pale, trembling, gun still clutched like a lifeline in his damp fingers. "Jules," Donovan said, rushing forward. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Julian, still composed, nodded once. "I'm all right. Just, you processed." He offered a small, grim smile. A little gun barrel to the chest can really wake a guy up. The chief turned to Becker like a storm turning on a tree. "Officer Becker," he said, voice low and venom-laced, "what in God's name do you think you're doing?" Becker swallowed hard. "Sir, he was acting suspicious." "Suspicious," Donovan snapped. "He's FBI, Special Agent Julian Hayes. He's been with the Bureau for over 20 years. You pulled your gun on a federal agent while he was shopping for cereal." The crowd, which had been watching in hushed anticipation, gasped audibly. Cameras zoomed in. Whispers turned into murmurings of outrage. The revelation detonated through the room. The man Becker had profiled, harassed, and threatened wasn't just innocent. He was elite. Becker's face drained of color. "Agent? Chief, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "That's the problem," Donovan growled. "You didn't know, and you didn't care. You looked at him and made a choice, a racist, reckless choice. And now you're going to face the consequences." Julian said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence carried more weight than any accusation. Becker, now visibly trembling, began to stammer out apologies. "Sir, I mean Agent Hayes, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking clearly. I thought—" "You thought wrong," Donovan cut him off, stepping between Julian and Becker. "Holster your weapon now." Becker obeyed, fumbling with the clasp. His hand shook so violently he nearly dropped the firearm. "Now your badge," Donovan ordered. Becker hesitated, then unclipped the shield from his chest and handed it over. "Radio," Donovan barked. Click, another handoff. Donovan turned to his officers now arriving at the scene. "Escort him out of the store. He is suspended, effective immediately." As Becker was led away, his face a picture of shock and disgrace, Julian finally exhaled. Donovan faced him again, voice softer now. Jules, I'm so sorry. I can't believe one of mine. Julian raised a hand. Frank, it's not your guilt to carry, but it is your house to clean. Donovan nodded solemnly. And clean it I will. In the aisle where violence nearly erupted, justice had arrived, quiet, swift, and complete. But for Julian, this was never about just one officer. It was about the system that trained him, armed him, and let him act, and that reckoning had only just begun. Chief Donovan didn't just walk out of that store with Becker's badge. He walked straight into the Internal Affairs Division with a demand that echoed louder than a siren. No mercy. There was no room for politics, no shield of union protocol to hide behind. This wasn't a suspension pending review. This was the ignition of a career-ending investigation backed by fury, facts, and 4 different camera angles. Within hours, the gears of accountability were turning. Donovan personally handed the case to his most aggressive internal affairs captain, a woman known simply as Captain Briggs, the type who didn't blink at rank or reputation. Her marching orders were clear, and she echoed them at the first team briefing. If he violated the public trust, we will crush the doubt, and if he broke the law, we refer it to the DA. Julian Hayes, still composed even as adrenaline faded, submitted his written statement with precision. It was devoid of hyperbole, packed with detail. Every word Becker said, every movement, every step in the aisle, the moment the pistol was raised, the decision to call Donovan, all of it went into the record. But Julian wasn't just testifying to clear his name. He was making sure this never happened again. And then came the tapes. 4 high-definition surveillance videos from community grocers, synced and time-stamped. From the cereal aisle and the front register, from above the dairy section and the self-checkout hub, each showed the same truth. Becker's posture, aggressive and unchecked. Julian, calm and cooperative. The slow escalation, the trembling gun, the fear behind the badge. The security footage was unrelenting. It crushed any room for doubt. At the disciplinary hearing, Becker sat hunched beside his union-provided defense lawyer, his once sharp features now pale and hollow. He looked more like a deflated balloon than a law enforcement officer. The board was composed of senior leadership, civil rights observers, and a public transparency liaison. There would be no closed doors for this hearing. Julian was not in attendance, but his written statement was read aloud. Every word landed with weight. Then came the playback of the video evidence. No one in that room shifted in their seats. No one whispered. Every moment of misconduct played in silence. Becker's lawyer tried to frame the situation as a moment of youthful misjudgment. He invoked stress, the post-2020 pressures on police officers, even Becker's personal trauma. But nothing could explain away what everyone saw, a man abusing power in the plainest, most damning way. Then Chief Donovan took the floor. Unlike the others, he didn't read from notes. He didn't recite policy. He spoke like a man holding a mirror up to his own house. He created the confrontation, Donovan said. He saw a threat where there was none. He saw a black man, his own neighbor, and chose violence over procedure. That is not who we are, and it damn sure won't be who we become. The board's decision was unanimous. Officer Kyle Becker was terminated immediately, effective that very hour. But it wasn't over. 2 IA officers approached Becker with a resignation form and a sealed plastic bag. One offered the pen. "You'll sign this," they told him, "or we pursue criminal charges for aggravated assault and official misconduct." Becker, hands trembling, signed his name. His locker had already been cleared. He was escorted out the side exit, avoiding the front steps where press and protesters had begun to gather. Inside, Donovan sat alone for a long moment. He stared down at the badge Becker had handed over. Then, with a sigh, he locked it away in a drawer labeled simply, "Never again." Justice wasn't gentle that day. It didn't knock. It kicked the door off its hinges and left no room for it to be rebuilt the same way again. The air outside the hearing room was heavy, not with anger anymore, but with something deeper, regret, reflection, and an ache that ran bone deep. Donovan found Julian in the lobby, sitting quietly, hands folded, eyes distant. For the first time since that gun was drawn, the chief's voice dropped the armor. "Jules, what if you hadn't had my number?" Julian looked up slowly, that familiar cool steadiness back in his eyes, but tempered now by fatigue. He didn't need to think about the answer. Then it wouldn't have ended like this, he said, the weight of his words falling hard between them. It was a quiet truth, a devastating one. Because Julian wasn't just another man with a story. He was one of the lucky few who had the power to call for help and be heard. His case wasn't a miracle. It was a mirror. And what it reflected was the bitter truth that too many others never got that call answered. They didn't get a chief in their corner. They didn't have a badge behind their rights. Donovan's fists clenched. That's the part that keeps me up, he said. What about the ones who can't name drop the chief? What about the kids who walk into stores and don't walk back out the same? Julian didn't answer right away. He looked toward the exit where a small crowd was gathering around the courthouse steps. Not shouting, not angry, just present, bearing witness. We tell their stories too, he finally replied. And we make damn sure Becker's name isn't just erased, it's remembered. For what happens when prejudice meets power without consequence? The case had ended. The job was done. But the fight was far from over. For Julian, justice was not a conclusion. It was a beginning. A solemn vow that the badge, the law, and the system would no longer be a shield for bias, but a sword for accountability. As he stepped outside, someone in the crowd handed him a folded poster. It read, "Equal justice means equal protection." The phrase stuck with him, because for once the system had listened. But what echoed louder was the question it left behind. Will it keep listening when no one's watching?